Welcome to this month's installment of Creation Justice Webinars. I'm Brooks Barrett. I'm the Environmental Justice Minister for the United Church of Christ. I am joined by my co-host, that one who is blazing trails for justice throughout the South and the nation, the Reverend Michael Malcolm. He is the Executive Director for Alabama Interfaith Power and Light and the People's Justice Council. Michael, today we are metaphorically stepping onto sacred ground. Today, Warren County, North Carolina stands as sacred ground, but it has not always been seen that way. 40 years ago, the state of North Carolina deemed the county to be a dumping grounds. But the last word was not spoken. The divine was at work. A community rose up, a movement rose up, and the script was flipped. Today, we're going to be telling that story. It's going to be coming to us from three persons who were integral to making that happen. Before I introduce our three esteemed guests for today, Michael, I want to know how you are thinking about this occasion and how you are framing this conversation for today.
Yeah, Brooks, first and foremost, thank you all for being here. Thank you for those that are listening and those that will participate. I am eager to hear what has to be said today. A short time ago, we had a campaign saying we're still in. It was our way of signaling to the rest of the world that we were still in the fight for a better climate. We were saying that we were still in concerning our commitments made with the Paris Climate Accord. We're still in. Today, those that are in the environmental justice movement are saying that we're still in it. 40 years, the children of Israel marched in the wilderness searching for a safe place that they can call home. And for 40 years, environmental justice pioneers such as a Dolly Burwell, the Reverend Dr. Benjamin Chavis Jr., and the Reverend William Kearney have fought for a safe place that we too can call home. In Jackson, Mississippi right now, people don't even have water. This predominantly Black state capital has no water for the people to consume. The reason that they don't have water is because of a historic lack of investment in its infrastructure. Now, this type of resource apartheid is not uncommon in the South. In fact, it's not uncommon through these yet to be United States of America. We've seen it often. We are still in it. The justice warriors that we will hear from today are still fighting for a better tomorrow. They've been joined in their rallying cry by others of us who are full of faith in the fight for a better tomorrow. Those of us who have picked up this mantle are saying, we're still in it. In other words, our fight continues. But how long must we continue to suffer? At what point do we find reprieve from our labors? Is 40 years long enough? I believe that these questions are an invitation for those of us who have faith and are full of faith to be moved in this fight for justice. It is a call to get involved in this fight for a better tomorrow. When we all get involved in this fight, when we all start advocating, when we all start participating, the fight will end and we will win. Then we can put down our weapons and pick up our building tools. I look forward to the day that we can celebrate the work versus realizing that we're still in it. I look forward to our speakers today and hearing what they have to say. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Michael. We are still in it. We're in it with faith and we're in it together. I am grateful now for this opportunity to introduce our three panelists for today in the order that they'll be speaking. First up, we will have the Reverend William Kearney, who is an associate minister for Coley Springs Missionary Baptist Church in Warren County, North Carolina. He is also the community outreach manager at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill's Center for Health Promotion and Disease Prevention, which specializes in asset-based capacity building for groups and communities. He has extensive experience as a consultant and is known for bringing together community and academic partnerships to develop successful community-engaged research projects. Up next, we'll then have the Reverend Dr. Benjamin Chavis, Jr. He is a long-distance runner in the advancement of justice. He worked with Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. as the youth coordinator for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. In the course of organizing for the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice in the 1970s, he was framed in prison and ultimately pardoned for a crime he did not commit. Through the Warren County protests, the publication of the Toxic Waste and Race in the United States report, and the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit, Chavis became a central figure in the environmental justice movement in the 1980s and 1990s. In 1993, he became the youngest person to be elected as executive director and CEO of the NAACP. He is currently the PBS TV executive producer for the Chavis Chronicles and the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. And finally, we will hear from Dolly Burwell. A persuasive case can be made for Dolly being the mother of the environmental justice movement due to her work in organizing the Nonviolent Action Campaign in Warren County 40 years ago and her continued work within the movement locally and nationally. In recent times, she has been featured in everything from the Washington Post to the Soledad O'Brien Show. Profiles of her can be found in several books, including Crazy for Democracy, Women in Grassroots Movements, The Politics of Motherhood, Activist Voices from the Left to the Right, and Women Reshaping Human Rights, How Extraordinary Activists Are Changing the World. She served as the chair of the joint Warren County State PCB Landfill Working Group, a task force that worked to secure millions of dollars from the state of North Carolina to detoxify the Warren County PCB landfill, which was successfully completed in 2004. Without further ado, we will turn things over to the Reverend Bill Kearney.
Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here and honored, and thanks to Brooks and Michael for inviting, and the rest of the team inviting me to be a part of this distinguished panel with Dolly Burwell and Reverend Dr. Ben Chavis. As was mentioned, I'm Associate Minister, Health Ministry Coordinator at Coley Springs Missionary Baptist Church, which was the hub during the time of the protest. I'm reminded how the Bible says one plants, another waters, but God gets the increase. And I feel like my work is building on the shoulders of those who came ahead. And my work is to help capture and own our story. As a matter of fact, the Warren County Environmental Action Team is leading the organization for the commemoration this year, the 40th anniversary, and very intently trying to capture all the awesome stories of the protesters so they won't become invisible. My role is to help elevate the voice, help move the ball across the goal line. I believe that what man meant for harm, God meant for our good. Being a health ministry coordinator and being back in Warren County since early 2000, I was really surprised how little our community knew about what had happened right there in our county. I felt my job was to help my community understand the magnitude of what everyday people came together, found their voices, came together in a collective voice and birthed a movement. To help build community pride that we're not weak or poor or voiceless, but we have a voice. We're all environmentalists. We're all accountable to God's creation. We're stewards. So my work is trying to help my community and those beyond see that there's power in unity, and we have a voice. And when we use our collective voice and to challenge and take advantage of opportunities, we can begin to move the needle. I like to think I'm more like a stem cell for God, because I don't have any particular labels. I wear a lot of different hats, but whatever the need might be. But the core of my work is community organization, bringing people out of their silos and to places where we can function and work and find our gifts and be productive toward coming out with resolutions to our situations, to our problems. So I'm really honored to be here, and really excited about how God has brought together so many partners this year to be a part of the commemoration. The Warren County story is not just our story, but it's a global story. And all us are accountable to taking care of God's creation. As a matter of fact, as our health ministry coordinator in our church, our focus was basically on healthy environments, physical activity, access to healthy foods, which stirred up a question from some of our congregates. Is environment, the food we're growing in our community garden, safe because we sit so close to the landfill? So we still have questions relative to the impact of the toxins within our community environment, as far as individual health, and also the impact on our economy as well. So I'm hoping that our commemoration this year will be more than just remembering, but also strategizing on how we go forward to seek wholeness, reparation, and justice, not just for Warren County, but other communities across the country, around the world, who also have been victims of unjust policies and behaviors. So I'm really honored to be here on the panel with Dolly and Dr. Chavis and all of you with UCC. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Kearney. And we'll now turn things over to Reverend Dr. Benjamin Chavis.
Let me start with thank you, Brooks, to Malcolm, and to Reverend Kearney. I want to say amen to your words of wisdom, words of faith, words of dedication. I'm always glad to be on the panel with Dolly Burwell anywhere in the world. And certainly this is the 40th anniversary acknowledgement of the beginning of what has grown into a global movement, the environmental justice movement. I'm looking forward to our joint discussions. I'll just make a few opening statements. This is another day that the Lord has made. And we're called not only to remember what happened 40 years ago in Warren County, but I see this as an opportunity to rededicate ourselves to environmental justice, to climate justice, to racial justice, to healthcare justice, to justice for women, to justice for people who are locked down disproportionately in prisons and jails in America, justice for everybody. I think one of the things that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. taught us in the 1960s, he said a threat, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And of course, what happened in Warren County over 40 years ago was not only a threat, an environmental threat, a healthcare threat to the people who lived in that Black community where Cold Springs Baptist Church is located today. But it was a threat to all the people of color communities across America and throughout the world. And that is why I think the first thing we have to do on this day is to thank the Lord, is to thank God for the vigilance, for the determination, for the stick-to-itiveness, for the perseverance, and for the courage. When Molly, Dolly and many of the mothers of the movement, when I think of Dolly Burwell, I think of MM, mother of the movement. She's still on the case. And I know she lives in my home county now, Granville County, but all of our counties, Granville County, Vance County, Warren County, Brooks, we all experience some of the same challenges today in Eastern North Carolina. And so I'm thankful that the protests 40 years ago was not in vain. The sacrifice 40 years ago was not in vain. And of course, when I stood in Cold Spring Baptist Church, Reverend Kearney, on the 30th anniversary, I used the text, which I'm going to use again this Saturday when I'm up in Warrenton, from the Psalms, "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof." You see, I think that one of the reasons why we have destruction of the earth, destruction of the water, destruction of the air, is because I think people don't understand that the earth doesn't belong to us. The air doesn't belong to us. The water that we may consume, what the earth brings forward, we may drink the water, we may breathe the air, but that's God's air we breathe. You know, and I think that the environmental movement, this is just not an applied science movement about toxins and hazardous. It is epidemiological, but it's also theological. And I think that when people get out of step with God, they get out of step with one another. You know, and I think that the targeting of people of color communities, as it was, keep in mind, that dump just didn't show up in Warren County. Warren County was selected. It was targeted. It was the most predominantly Black, most predominantly rural, most predominantly agricultural, most predominant with a shallow aquifer level, the last place on earth where you should build a dump to dump tons of polychlorinated biphenyls. That last place was Warren County, North Carolina. But I'm so thankful that Dolly and other mothers of the movement and children and men laid down on the street, Brooks, in front of trucks with great courage, with great persistence. Of course, this is 1982. And after spending most of 1970s in prison in North Carolina, the last thing I wanted to do is go to jail again in North Carolina. But Lord have mercy, on September the 15th, 1982, I went back to jail in Warren County, protesting the dumping in Warren County of the PCBs. And that's when I first coined the term environmental racism, which is racial discrimination in environmental policymaking. It is the deliberate targeting of people of color communities for environmental hazardous and toxic waste facilities. It is the exclusion of people of color in policymaking at the county level, at the municipal level, at the state level, at the federal level, and even now at the global level. So we got work to do. Environmental racism is real. And I like what Reverend Malcolm said, that we are still in it. And I would say, yes, we're still in it to change it. We are changing the it. When we first tried to bring the intersection of civil rights and environment together, people in the civil rights community said, "Ben, that's for tree huggers. That's for people just trying to hug trees, you know." But they didn't understand that hugging a tree, keeping water clean, keeping the air we breathe clean, that's hugging humanity. You know, so you can't separate one part of God's creation from another part of God's creation. The earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. Everything on earth, the fullness thereof is sacred. So I'm thankful that the United Church of Christ made an invaluable contribution to when they sent me to Warrenton, and when they put up the first money, Brooks, to do that national study, it was $100,000. Nobody had ever asked the question, is there a correlation between race and the location of all these toxic waste facilities in the United States of America? So we researched a statistical study, every zip code, including Alaska and Hawaii. And what came out was shocking. Race was the number one factor that determined the location of these facilities. It was not poverty. It was not other socioeconomic, it was race, predominant factor. That's in 1982. 40 years later, in 2022, it is still the most predominant factor. So thank God for the movement, the environmental justice movement. I'm glad we're having this panel. We're in it to change it.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Benjamin Chavis. And we will now turn things over to Dolly Burwell.
Ms. Dolly, you're on mute.
You put on mute.
Thank you, Brooks, and the United Church of Christ for hosting this wonderful panel discussion. I'm delighted to be sharing this discussion with my friend Bill Kearney from Warren County, whose roots go a long way back, even though he just relocated back in the 2000s. But his mission really is to bring us together to tell our own story. And I'm thankful, always thankful to him. And of course, my comrade, Ben Chavis, who's also a friend, but a person who we've been struggling together for a long time. And I am just delighted to be here. And you know, Brooks, as we approach this 40th anniversary, what I've been reflecting on mostly is not the technical stuff of what happened, how many tons were dispersed, disposed of, or anything like that. But I've been reflecting on, number one, the people of Warren County and the community of Afton. And I also been reflecting on the many reasons why I just love this county and this community. Warren County is a beautiful county. It has amazing people. It has wonderful and beautiful people. It is a place that was once known for its wonderful natural springs and freely roaming wildlife and deer and even wild turkeys. It is a county that, as being said, once consisted of more than 14,000 enslaved Black people, approximately 600 free Black people, and about 4,000 white people. I have been particularly reflecting on how I felt on that day in 1978, when I learned that the War Transformer Company of Raleigh had illegally dumped 30,000 gallons of toxic PCB-laced oil along the roadsides of 210 miles of North Carolina in 14 different counties, including Warren County. I have been reflecting, and sometimes with great pain, on the day that I learned that under the leadership of our governor, the state of North Carolina was making plans to build a toxic waste landfill in the Afton community of Warren County. I've also been reflecting and on the deep emotions of Warren County citizens on that day, especially those living in the Afton community. You know, the emotions ran the gamut, from being disappointed that the state, a state in which we live, would dump toxic waste on a poor and politically powerless community. Particularly being disappointed that the Environmental Protection Agency, an agency whose job it was to protect the citizens of Warren County from waste and toxic chemicals, that they would allow this to happen to the people in Warren County. They were fearful. They were saddened. I've been reflecting on my own emotions that ran also the gamut, feeling a sense of sheer sadness, a sense of anger, a sense of power, feeling powerlessness, and also, I admit, a sense of feeling afraid. But then I recall the scripture, 2 Timothy 1-6. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. And I particularly focus on the word power. So I used every tool that I had acquired to organize my community, to fight against this injustice. And I believe that we had the power to fight even against the state of North Carolina, a powerful state of North Carolina, and the Environmental Protection Agency to fight this blatant act of racism, that through Christ who strengthened us, all things were possible. And despite the many emotions and sometimes that I had, and sometimes even with a few tears in my eyes, I could clearly see. And I deeply understood the reason why Governor Hunt and the state of North Carolina chose our county, Warren County, as their home to put this toxic waste dump. First, I will tell you, I believe, and we believe, that it was because Warren County and the African community was a majority African American community. We believed that at that time, and Dr. Chavis came back and confirmed it for us through the Toxic Waste and Race Report. We also believe that because the county consisted of poor and politically powerless people, that the state thought they could get away with dumping toxic waste on us. And thirdly, the state of North Carolina assumed that because Warren County and the African community was predominantly Black and lacked economic and political power, that we wouldn't have any choice but to accept what they were doing to us. But I tell you, and I stand here today to tell you that the state of North Carolina grossly underestimated the spirit of the African American ancestors that continue to live today within the people of Warren County. And so I remembered what both my grandparents and my parents taught me. They said, when you are given lemons, do not cry because the lemons are too bitter, but just make some lemonade. And so I began to do just that. Now I will tell you that some people made different types of lemonade. Some people made pink lemonade. Some people made sweet lemonade. And some people made just regular lemonade. But so that some people made lemonade by using the legal system. And there were 3 lawsuits that were filed against the state of North Carolina. Although all 3 of the lawsuits were dismissed, an agreement was reached with the state to deed back to the county 125 acres of the 150 acres of land that the state had purchased to put the landfill. And I do believe that this agreement prevented Warren County from becoming a regional toxic waste dump that the state was trying to site in Warren County. Some people made lemonade by registering people to vote, thus increasing the political power of African Americans in Warren County. We went from having 1 African American on the Board of County Commissioners whose name was a Sharon, and there were 4 other Sharons in the county, to having a fully minority governmental body. We elected a majority on the county commissioner, a majority on the school board, members to the state house, and finally Congresswoman Clayton to Congress. As a community and social justice activist, I chose to make lemonade by organizing my community and engaging in civil disobedience. So in the fall of 1982, we organized community protests every day for 6 weeks, with hundreds gathering at the Cold Spring Missionary Baptist Church in Athens, marching to the site of the landfill and blocking the trucks filled with PCB lace. I remember that I called on nationally known preachers, civil rights leaders, environmental justice leaders, students, and just everyday justice-loving people from across the state and nation to join Warren County citizens of every race and creed, every age and gender, in the movement for environmental justice and against environmental racism. The Washington Post dubbed the protest as the biggest civil rights movement since the 1960s. I was arrested 5 times, along with approximately 500 others on civil disobedience charges and impeding traffic. Together, we labored and gave birth to the Warren County Environmental Justice Movement. And again, today, I find myself reflecting on all those who have passed away, those from Warren County and across the nation who helped birth this movement for environmental justice. I find myself reflecting on all those who cooked meals and fed us while we were marching and protesting, those who paid our bonds to get us out of jail, those who prayed for us every day and night, who prayed for our safety, as well as hundreds of those who marched and went to jail with us. Among those was my own late daughter, Kimberly Burwell, who through her demonstrated courage, and though she was just a child, drew many to join us in the movement. But you know, regardless of the role people played, every role was distinct, every role was significant, and every role was important. I will always remember the sacrifices that every individual in Warren County and across the state and nation made towards developing a movement for environmental justice and against environmental racism. So I close my remarks this afternoon by challenging you as we commemorate and celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Warren County PCB land via protest and the birth of the environmental justice movement, to always remember that when given lemons, make some really good lemonade. And in the spirit of my favorite Congressman, John Lewis, to get in some good trouble. You know, Dr. King told us that the moral universe is long. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So let us keep bending that arc until no longer there is in Jackson, Alabama, till no longer there is climate injustice, to that day when we can all say we have eliminated environmental racism and we can say we have truly, truly achieved environmental justice.
Thank you so much, Dolly Burwell, for those tremendous words and that story that you have shared with us, and the light you have shined on those momentous moments and that movement, that birth of a movement. Michael, do you have for us a question for us as we get started? We encourage people to drop questions for us to ask of our panelists.
Yeah, first and foremost, let me say again, I am in awe with the legends that I'm speaking with. I read about you all, and I'm inspired by what I read, but to actually be able to speak with you all live and in person is truly a blessing. As you've looked through the years of doing this work, 40 years now, what for you has changed and what gives you hope? I'm often asked what gives me hope, but I don't ever feel like I've been in this thing long enough or lived long enough to even have to look for hope at this point. Right now, I still got energy to work. So hope is something that's going to happen when I get past the point of doing the work. What gives you hope, and what have you seen that really stands out for you in your time in doing this work? And feel free, either one of you all.
Let me just,
Malcolm, thank you.
Oh.
I'll go let Molly go first. Go ahead. You go, Molly.
Yes, let me just say that in 1982, when this PCB was dumped in Warren County, I will tell you, our hope was really almost nil. But today, as we move forward and as we begin to celebrate this 40th anniversary, I see so many young people who are continuing to fight for environmental justice and to recognize that the struggle for environmental justice is not over. As Reverend Kearney said, and as you said, we are in it. But I believe that, again, as a person of faith, that we will finally one day achieve those things, that if we just keep fighting and keep hope alive. I know it won't be easy, but we have to keep hope alive that we can achieve what we're set out to fight for. And in 1982, we had nothing, but God gave us the spirit of hope, and we have kept that alive. And today, as we fight for environmental justice, not just for ourselves, but others, I think that, and see others fight, that keeps my hope alive each day.
Thank you. I just want to just said, well, when I arrived at Warren County, I saw young people. I saw women and children with great courage and great faith. There was also fear, but the courage and faith overcame the fear. And when people around the country, keep in mind, the media played a role. Like in 1982, we didn't have these cell phones. We didn't have social media. We didn't have Facebook or TikTok or Twitter. What we had was our faith in God, our faith in one another. Keep in mind, Dolly just didn't get in the movement because of what happened, and Dolly's been in the movement a long time. And I was so proud of Dolly and her children. You remember Dolly, y'all even went over to Africa later on in the 1980s to talk about a luta continua, the struggle continues. So my answer, Reverend Malcolm, is that what gives me hope today, one is that the movement is still alive, and the movement has grown exponentially. What started as a local protest of courageous and faithful Black people in Warren County has now grown into a multiracial, multicultural, multilingual, multi-geographical, worldwide global movement for environmental justice. They even used the term environmental justice at the United Nations. They use the term now at the World Council of Churches. They use the term now at the National Council of Churches. So I think that investment, that courage, Dolly, you and your daughters and others, I saw children under 12 years old willing to lay down in the street for freedom, justice, and equality. And I think that today, in 2022, we not only have to remind our people of the history 40 years later, but we need to get encouragement. To me, we should learn from history. We don't have to repeat history. We have to learn from history. And that's why this debate going on now about they're trying to ban books, critical race theory. They don't want people to tell the truth. One school in Florida was trying to teach environmental justice. Local politicians found out about it. They tried to fire the teacher, Dolly, for teaching about what happened in Warren County. So we got to roll up our sleeves. We got to regenerate our movement. What gives me hope is that there are millions of young people. Dolly, on the way for the program today, I got messages in Portuguese from Brazil, where Black women in Brazil are leading the struggle now for environmental justice. And they have got inspired, Dolly, what happened 40 years ago in Warren County. So I think that now's the time for us not only to give recognition to what happened 40 years ago, but learn from its effectiveness, learn from, a lot of people don't believe that grassroots organizing is still effective. It is still effective. I'm worried now about the low voter turnout in too many of our places. Right here in North Carolina, it's early voting right now. And by now, in 2022, we ought not to have to twist people's arms about how important it is to vote. And anybody who doesn't think that voting is not important is a person that doesn't know history, is a person that doesn't know culture, is a person that doesn't know the tradition. And those of us in the church community in particular, it is our responsibility not only to preach that gospel on Sunday, but we got to get out in the streets, we got to get out in the communities, and do a lot of more grassroots organizing. And I know, I've seen in my own life and ministry, people will respond. If you give them the right encouragement, the right faith-based testimony, people will join. That's why I come to this 40th anniversary. I'm more optimistic in 2022 than I was in 1982.
Yes.
Oh, what gives me hope? What gives me hope is the past few years, I think people have come to realization that we don't live in bubbles. What happens on one side of town affects the other side. What happens on the other side of the globe affects us as a whole. So this new awareness that none of us are isolated, you know, even when one is racially mistreated, it affects the other group as well. So this new awareness, this new message, and people who are willing to lean into uncomfortable conversations to talk about history wrongs that need to be reconciled and dealt with. Why was Warren County positioned to be a dump? We have to go and look at its history. So I'm hopeful that people are willing now to have uncomfortable but very necessary conversations about racism and its effects on not just on Black and people of color, but us as a nation. So I'm hopeful that there's a flow of the Holy Spirit that's helping people come outside their tents and begin to unite just in crisis, not just in crisis, but in good opportunities as well. So I'm hopeful
Right.
God is in control.
Thank you, Reverend Kearney. Brooks, just let me add one thing that I must say for the record, because I know this has been videotaped. Warren County is a special place on God's earth. This is the county that Floyd McKissick chose to build Soul City. Why? Because Warren County, Dolly's point, have people who are willing to strive to improve their quality of life. And of course, when Soul City began to materialize in the late 1970s, going into the 80s, the politicians came out against what Floyd was trying to do in Soul City. But I just want to say, and I just saw Charlemagne McKissick on responding. I just think that the Burwell family, the McKissick family, and also we want to call out the name of Reverend Leon White. Mm-hmm. He's not doing well now. He was our pastor at Oak Level United Church of Christ. And Leon went to jail also several times there in Warren County. And I just think that the Black church, Reverend Kearney, across denominational lines, Reverend Malcolm, Dr. Brent, we need to call our clergy to reaffirm the importance of liberation theology, to affirm the importance of engaging and mobilizing people. And I just want to end on this point. The same people who deny environmental justice are the same people who deny climate justice, are the same people who deny racial justice, are the same people who deny rights for women. Look at the Supreme Court. I mean, all these things are connected. And you're right, Reverend Kearney. We got to move out of our silos. We can't be a one-issue movement. You know, we have to struggle for freedom, justice, and equality everywhere on this earth. Look what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi. People don't have water to drink. And after Flint, Michigan, people thought that wouldn't happen again. But what we know is what happened in Flint, Michigan was not isolated. What happened in Warren County is not isolated. It's part of this tendency that people put profits over people, that people put politics over people. People put racism, racial hatred over loving one another. So we got work to do, but I'm optimistic because I think our young people today, Dolly and Reverend Kearney, will respond if we open these doors. You know, we don't need to have a movement where everybody in the movement is over 60. We need a movement where people engage in younger ages. I got involved in an early age. My only regret, I got involved when I was 12. My only regret is I should have gotten involved when I was 6.
Thank you for those thoughts and reflections. Much appreciated. We've got some questions from the audience that have to do with what strategy, what tactics, what practices are needed today. And Shauna Williams says, 40 years later, with so many important issues facing our communities and our nation, how do we stop Black and brown communities from getting dumped on, meaning putting toxic waste in our backyards? It's still happening. How do we stop it once and for all? If, as you reflect on moving from that moment when that stops, from today to then, what's needed and what needs to happen? What are your thoughts and recommendations on that?
Well, I would say that it's never, we as Ben said, we didn't have cell phones in 1982 like we have today. We didn't have Twitter. We didn't have TikTok. So some of the strategies that we use, even though they might seem antiquated and outdated because we have all this technology, it works. So don't forget the things that my advice would never be afraid to march. Never be afraid to speak truth to power. Never be afraid to believe that you have the power. In when in 1982, when the landfill was being sited, people in Warren County were saying, take this toxic waste to email Alabama. But after the toxic waste and race report that revealed what true environmental justice would look like in terms of not citing a dump in a person of color community, when we discovered that water was in the landfill, the state thought that they could pump that water out and take it to another community of color. What did people say? No, we will go back to jail. You cannot take this contaminated water out of the landfill and put it in another Black community. And those are the kinds of decisions and lessons learned along the way that I think going to help us reach the goal that we're trying to reach in terms of, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think we can all work towards making sure. And I will tell you that I know right here in North Carolina, since they were trying to put that dump in Warren County, they have not cited another dump in Warren County. And there are some issues around environmental justice that we still are fighting and will continue to fight. But they have not put another dump here in this state or in this county.
From a spiritual perspective, I look at us as Christians, we have all power. Jesus has all power. We have power in our stories. We have power in our testimony. And if we really seek God and seek his calling for us, it might be simple, but do what God calls you to do. Stand up, speak collectively. Don't let people throw us a bone and we fight among ourselves, because there's power within our testimony. He's given us this power, resurrected power. And that's why I pray every day, God, I want to walk in the full resurrected power of Jesus Christ. I want all that power. And that makes me humble before Lord God, but I can stand up against a system that needs to be challenged in my way. I can't do it your way, but finding your place and your calling, because we're here for a purpose. And I believe that Warren County was set aside for a purpose. I'm really instrumental at trying to document our history before it gets lost. Because where the landfill was sited, I knew it as Kearney town because my great grandfather owned lots of property there. But as the story was written, the Black side of history was being lost. So I said, I got to step in and do something. We got to tell our story. And there's power in our testimony and power in knowing your place in God in this bigger movement. And I think that's the power of what happened in Warren County. People were just, quote unquote, everyday people found a voice, and with that collective voice, they stood up against a system that should have been protecting them, but historically has been oppressing them. So again, we have power if we're believers. We just find that power in Christ.
That was one other question, or one last question, you all, that came in concerning young people. If they wanted to join the movement and be a part of this environmental justice, creation justice movement, how would you tell them to best get involved?
My parents taught me that charity begins at home. So learn about what's happening in your own backyard, in your own community, and get engaged in your community. And there are so many issues in each and every one of our communities that is begging for action. So find your local organizations, whether that's the NAACP, whether that's the Warren County Environmental Justice Action Team, or whether there's other organizations in your community. And it don't have to be just environmental justice, because environmental justice is tied to racial justice, it's tied to economic justice, it's tied to political justice. So whatever organization in your backyard that you can join with others to fight for justice, that's the way I encourage you to get involved.
Absolutely. And because we now have a global movement, I would like for our young people, particularly in the United States, to be more aware of what's going on in the Caribbean, what's going on in Brazil, what's going on in Africa. They would be inspired. And particularly, Dolly, a lot of these movements are led by young sisters, young Black women. You know, remind me of Fannie Lou Hamer, who said she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, and I think that as people raise their fists, sometimes with the cross in their hand, as an act of faith and solidarity. I work very close with the hip hop community, and I'm trying to encourage a lot of my artists to begin doing songs and art. And of course, we have to make sure that we have a culture of protest. Dollar is right. We need to keep marching. I've heard a whole lot of people say, Reverend Chavis, I'm tired of marching. And I ask them, when's the last time you marched? They ain't never marched. They tired of it. They say they're tired of doing something they never did. So sometimes you know what the worst form of voter suppression is? It's self-suppression. We get in our mind that our vote, it doesn't count. We get in our mind that I'm not gonna make an effort. You know, we can't get lazy when it comes to freedom, justice, and equality. And even in the church, I think the church, we have to not only encourage our congregations, but we need to do that outreach into the communities at large. There's thousands and millions of young people I hear from on the PBS television program who want to know what organization to join, what website. So Brent, I hope that, Dr. Brooks, that we will get this video. I would like to get this distributed. I think because so many people on social media, we need to chop this up, get it on Instagram, Twitter, and some of the jewels that Dolly has dropped, and Reverend Kearney and others, Reverend Malcolm, and get that out. I really believe that our young people will respond if they can get the information in a format that they receive information today.
Thank you so much. And we will have this up on YouTube. And I think your recommendation for cutting it up and chopping it up and making it digestible on social media is a terrific one that we should be following through on. As we come near the top of this hour, we are getting prepared. As soon as this webinar portion ends at the top of this hour, we will transition over to Thaddeus Elliott, who comes from our DC office and will be giving us the latest on what's happening legislatively to address environmental justice issues and how we can plug in to make a difference in that legislative process, which is so critical right now. As we bring things to a close, Michael, I invite you to kind of help us wrap things up, you know, and if the Spirit moves you to pray or to invite each of our panelists maybe to contribute a few words as we move to a prayerful end to this webinar.
I think I'll do just that. Actually, Brooks, I want to honor my elders who are in the room, and so I don't want to take the last word. I'll give them the last word. something that Dr. Chavis spoke a little while ago really resonated with me, and that we're in it, and we're in it to fight, and we're in it to win. And I love that, and I want that to be something that I say that sticks out. But I want each and every one of my elders, if they would, to just give us a quick word before we leave out of here. We'll start with Reverend Kearney.
Thank you. I'm excited. The 17th, which is Saturday, we're going to have an event at our church. We're going to have a commemorative walk. We're going to have our partners from all over the country there. An important piece of that is passing the Sankofa bird. The importance of revisiting our history in order that we might move forward and understanding who we are and why we're here and how we plan for the future. So we're looking forward to having a lot of young folk, college students, local students, and patriots like Reverend Chavis and matriarch like Dolly Burwell will be there to pass this bird to this new generation of activists. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Dr. Chavis, a few words?
Thank you. To God be the glory for the United Church of Christ. To God be the glory for Dolly Burwell and all those who sacrificed to give us what we now know as the environmental justice movement. To God be the glory for Holly Springs Missionary Baptist Church, Coley Springs Missionary Baptist Church. To God be the glory for Oak Level United Church of Christ. To God be the glory for all of our churches across denominational lines. And to God be the glory interfaith for all our brothers and sisters of the Islamic faith, of the Jewish faith, of the Christian faith. We all serve the same God. The oneness of God has given us the oneness of humanity. And to God be the glory as we continue to struggle in 2022 for environmental justice, racial justice, economic justice, and climate justice. To God be the glory.
Amen. To God be the glory. And now, Dolly Burwell, if you will bring us some final words.
Yes, to God be the glory. I join Dr. Chavis in that prophetic word, God be the glory. I will tell you, I've been moved today by Reverend Malcolm's statement, we're still in it. And yes, we're still in it, but we're going to fight to get out of it, to change it, and to move forward.